Let's understand what is webhook token authentication and how it works. Webhook token authentication in Kubernetes is a mechanism that allows Kubernetes to delegate the authentication of API requests to an external service. This approach enables Kubernetes to integrate with external authentication system for validating bearer token used in API requests, enhancing flexibility and allowing use of custom or centralized authentication logic. How webhook token authentication works. First is external authentication service. A separate service outside of Kubernetes is responsible for validating authentication tokens. This service is implemented as webhook that Kubernetes calls whenever it needs to authenticate a request. Second is API server configuration. The Kubernetes API server is configured to use a webhook by providing it with webhook URL and a CAS certificate, which are defined in webhook configuration file. Third is request handling. When an API request is made with a bearer token, the Kubernetes API server passes this token to configured webhook service via HTTP post. The webhook service processes the token and returns a response indicating whether token is valid, and if so, provides the identity, username, and groups associated with the token. Fourth is authorization decision. If token is validated successfully, API server uses identity information provided by webhook to perform authorization check based on Kubernetes RBAC role-based access control. If this token is invalid, request is rejected. Now let's understand it with one example. So step 1 will be create a webhook service. Set up an external service, for example, written in Python, Go, or anything that can validate whatever token is passed to it. This service should be accessible from Kubernetes API server. Then step 2 will be configure webhook in Kubernetes. Create a configuration file of webhook, typically named webhook config YML. So a sample config YML, we can check here how it will look like. So in this one, if you see, everything else is as same. Here if you see, in a server, your webhook service URL you have to provide with URL and port. Then comes CA bundle. It is a encoded CA certificate to validate the webhook server certificate. Then comes users, username, authentication and all. In a token, optional, it's not typically needed for webhook authentication. This file, the endpoint for webhook service and CA bundle to validate the service TLS certificate. Then comes step 3. Configure API server to use the webhook. Start Kubernetes API service with authentication-token-webhook-config-file flag pointing to your configuration file. A sample command can be like this. So it can have authentication-token-webhook-config and then file path to your config YML file. What it will do is that it sets cache duration for token authentication response. The second one, authentication-token-webhook-cache-detail as 5 minutes. Now comes step 4. Now webhook service response. The webhook service should handle incoming requests by validating token and returning a response in format expected by Kubernetes. A valid response code can be, a sample response code is attached here. It can have your API version, it will be a kind of token review, should have a status as authenticated true or false, and then it will provide username, UID, or groups. Groups will be used in case of RBAC to authorization. If your token is invalid, then a sample response it will provide as below. In this one, if you see kind is token review, in status it will be authenticated false. Now let's understand how webhook token authentication is different from its peers. So first is custom logic. Unlike a built-in authentication methods where service account tokens are basic auth, webhook token authentication allows custom authentication logic tailored to your specific security requirements, such as integration with corporate identity system or third-party services. Second is it has centralized management. Webhook token authentication can centralize the management of authentication in external service, which can simplify token revocation, rotation, and auditing compared to managing credentials directly within Kubernetes. In summary, what we can say, webhook token authentication in Kubernetes provides a powerful and flexible way to integrate external authentication system into your cluster security model. By delegating token validation to an external service, you can leverage custom authentication logic integrated with existing identity providers and maintain centralized control over authentication process.